It was a scorching afternoon when two bikers stopped at a dusty roadside, their engines roaring to silence. One of them, Alex, took off his helmet, wiping sweat from his forehead. As he turned, he noticed a frail boy, no older than 10, standing under a small tree, clutching the handle of an old, rusted bicycle. His clothes were worn out, his cheeks pale, yet his eyes had a quiet strength. "Sir, please buy my bike," the boy said softly, his voice trembling but determined. "Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days." The words hit Alex like a punch to the chest. The boy's tone wasn't begging. It was desperate but proud. His little hands tightened around the handlebar as though the bike was the last thing he had left to his name. For a moment, neither of the bikers spoke. The second biker, Mark, stepped closer, his expression hardening with disbelief. "Kid, this bike's falling apart," he said gently. The boy nodded, looking down at the dusty ground. "I know," he whispered, "but it still rides. Mommy says everything broken can still work if you don't give up." His words carried more maturity than any child should have. Alex glanced at Mark, his throat tightening. He bent down, asking, "Where's your mom, kid?" The boy hesitated, then pointed toward a narrow dirt path leading into a line of trees. The air grew still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Something about the boy's quiet strength pulled at them both. The bikers followed him, their boots crunching against gravel. The path led to a small shack made of wood and metal sheets, barely standing. Inside, a thin woman sat on the floor, her head resting against the wall, eyes half closed. She looked up as they entered, startled but polite. "Ma'am, your son said you haven't eaten," Alex said gently. The woman tried to smile, shaking her head. "We're fine," she whispered, voice weak but proud. "He just worries too much." Mark looked around. There was nothing in the shack except an old blanket, a jug of water, and a framed photo of a man in uniform. It didn't take long to understand she was alone and struggling to survive. "Was that your husband?" Mark asked softly, pointing at the photo. Her eyes glistened as she nodded. "He was a soldier," she said, her voice cracking. "He never came back. They said it was an accident during service, but we never got any help." Alex felt anger rise inside him. "And you're still living here?" "Nobody helped you?" he asked. The woman looked down. "I asked," she said, "but they said we didn't have proof. The house we lived in was taken by someone who said they had papers." The bitterness in her tone cut deep, but she quickly composed herself, brushing a hand through her son's hair. "It's okay. We still have each other." The boy stood close to her, holding her hand as though protecting her instead of the other way around. Mark's gaze hardened. "Do you know who took your house?" he asked. The woman nodded slowly. "A man my husband worked for. Said he'd help us after the accident, but he took everything, even my husband's savings." Her voice trembled, but she refused to cry. The bikers exchanged a look. Both knew what needed to be done. Alex knelt beside the boy. "You don't need to sell your bike, kid," he said firmly. "You just helped the right people." The boy blinked in confusion as Alex stood up, pulling out his phone. "Let's make a call." Within hours, a small crowd had gathered near the shack. The bikers had called some local riders they knew, men who worked in law enforcement, veterans, and community volunteers. They brought food, blankets, and supplies. The woman tried to refuse at first, her pride holding her back. "We can't take all this," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Alex said with a smile. "You've given enough already." The boy's eyes widened as people helped fix the broken roof, repainted the walls, and filled the shelves with groceries. For the first time in a long time, hope filled the air. Later that evening, Alex sat with the boy outside, the setting sun painting the sky in gold and red. "You really love your mom, don't you?" he asked. The boy nodded, hugging his knees. "She's all I have. Daddy said before he left that I have to protect her, even if I'm small." Alex smiled faintly, fighting to keep his emotions in check. "Well, you did more than protect her today. You changed her life." The boy looked up, confused. "How?" he asked. "Because you reminded us that being brave doesn't mean being big," Alex said quietly. Meanwhile, Mark made a few phone calls, digging deeper into the man who stole their home. What he found made his blood boil. The so-called businessman had forged documents to take several properties from widows of veterans. Mark sent the evidence to authorities, and by the next morning the news broke. The man was arrested for fraud and corruption. When Alex told the woman, she covered her mouth in shock. "You did this for us?" she whispered. Alex shook his head. No, ma'am. Your son did. He stood up when no one else did. The next week, the woman and her son were given a new home by a local charity, their story spreading through the town. The bikers visited often, bringing new clothes and toys. The boy had a new bicycle now, red and shiny, with his name on it. When Alex saw him ride down the street laughing freely, he felt something in his heart heal. The woman came out smiling with tears in her eyes. You gave us back our life, she said softly. No, Alex replied, smiling. Your son gave us back our faith. Months later, the boy and his mother attended a community event where veterans' families were honored. As the woman received a medal in her husband's name, the boy proudly stood beside her, holding her hand. In the crowd, Alex and Mark clapped, their leather jackets gleaming under the sunlight. The same bike that once symbolized desperation now stood in their garage, restored, shining, a reminder of courage and kindness. Sometimes the smallest plea can awaken the biggest hearts, and sometimes a child's simple act can remind the world what humanity truly means. Weeks later, as the boy's life began to regain color, a gentle calm settled over the small village. The woman started helping at a local community center, teaching sewing to other widows, while her son attended school for the first time in years. Every morning, he would polish his new bicycle before heading out, waving proudly at the neighbors. Yet even in their newfound peace, the memory of that day lingered, the day he tried to sell his old rusted bike to feed his mother. Sometimes she would watch him from the window, her eyes glistening with silent gratitude, whispering a prayer for the two bikers who had changed everything. Alex and Mark visited often, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just laughter, but each visit reminded them why they rode, not for adventure, but for connection. One afternoon, as clouds gathered above, Alex returned with an envelope in his jacket. Inside were official papers, the legal restoration of the house that had been stolen from them. The woman's hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning every line, unable to believe what she saw. It's yours again, Alex said, smiling. Completely yours. She stared at him in disbelief. How? She whispered. Mark chuckled softly. Let's just say justice likes to ride on two wheels. The boy leaped into his mother's arms, his laughter echoing through the quiet air. It was not just a home they regained. It was dignity, peace, and the future they thought they had lost forever. That night, the villagers gathered to celebrate. The woman had cooked her husband's favorite meal, rice, lentils, and roasted vegetables, and shared it with everyone who came. Music filled the air as the boy danced under the dim lights, his smile brighter than ever. Alex sat on a wooden stool watching them, his heart swelling with quiet pride. You ever think about settling down? Mark teased. Alex laughed, shaking his head. Maybe one day, but right now I think I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. The woman approached, offering him a plate of food. You're family now, she said warmly. Alex smiled, his eyes softening. Then I'm home. Days turned into weeks, and word of their story spread beyond the town. Local newspapers wrote about the boy's bravery and the bikers' compassion. Donations poured in, not just for them but for other families in need. The woman used part of the funds to start a small workshop, employing widows who had lost their husbands in service. She called it the Phoenix Stitch, symbolizing rebirth from pain. The boy often helped after school, learning how to handle fabrics while his laughter filled the space. The biker's insignia, a winged wheel, hung on the workshop wall, a tribute to the men who refused to look away from someone else's suffering. On a quiet Sunday morning, the boy rode his bike to the town's memorial park. He placed a small flower on the stone engraved with his father's name. We're okay now, Daddy, he whispered. Mommy smiles again. As he stood there, a gentle breeze brushed his face, almost like an unseen hand of reassurance. Alex and Mark watched from a distance, saying nothing. Some moments they both knew were meant to be silent. When the boy turned back toward them, the morning light framed his face. No longer the frightened child who tried to sell his bike, but a young soul filled with hope and strength. They exchanged smiles and without a word started their engines, knowing their journey had just begun, not on the road, but in the hearts they had touched.